The sterile hum of the space station was Elliot's only companion as he stared out at the endless expanse of stars. A half-finished report blinked on the holographic screen in front of him, but his mind was elsewhere. Somewhere in the stillness, a memory stirred, one he had fought to bury but could never forget. Her name wasn't really Rapunzel, but it was the name he had given her the first time he saw her. The nickname came to him as he gazed at her luminous, flowing hair, strands that shimmered like woven starlight and seemed to move with a life of their own. She was a seraph, a being of near-mythic status, whose kind had descended from the heavens to establish fragile diplomatic ties with humanity. They were ethereal, their presence like that of angels, but their laws were rigid and their disdain for humanity barely concealed. Elliot had been young then, a junior researcher assigned to the Interspecies Exchange Program. His job was to study seraph physiology, a task that required clinical detachment. But Rapunzel shattered that detachment with her curiosity and quiet defiance of the rules that governed her kind. The memory played out in vivid detail. He had been adjusting a sensor in the sterile, white-lit lab when she approached him, her voice soft yet otherworldly. "Do you always work this late?" she asked, her iridescent eyes reflecting the pale glow of the equipment. He had laughed nervously, unsure if her question was a test or genuine interest. "It helps pass the time." "Time," she echoed, as if tasting the word. "It passes differently for you. For me, it stretches endlessly, yet slips away too quickly." Those conversations had grown longer, more personal. Against every protocol, against every warning, they had forged a bond. She spoke of her people's laws, their unyielding expectations. He shared his dreams of discovery and the loneliness of a life devoted to science. Their connection had been a fragile thread, spun in secret until the day it snapped. Elliot rubbed his temples and leaned back in his chair. The past was a dangerous place to dwell, yet it had a way of seeping into the present. Marina's voice jolted him back to reality. "Elliot," she called from the adjacent quarters. "You're up late again." Marina appeared in the doorway, her arms crossed. She was beautiful in a grounded, pragmatic way. Short-cropped dark hair, sharp eyes that missed nothing, and a presence that was as steady as it was demanding. Her patience for his late nights had waned over the years, though she never said so outright. "I just lost track of time," Elliot said, avoiding her gaze. Marina stepped closer, studying him. "You've been distracted lately." "More than usual." Elliot forced a smile. "Just work. You know how it is." Her expression softened, but only slightly. "Don't forget we have the meeting with the council tomorrow. They're finalizing the Seraph protocol updates." The mention of the Seraph made Elliot's chest tighten. He nodded mutely, and Marina lingered for a moment before retreating, her footsteps fading into the quiet. Elliot exhaled and leaned forward, resting his head in his hands. His marriage to Marina had been built on shared goals and mutual respect, but it lacked the fire, the aching vulnerability that Rapunzel had ignited in him. He had tried to move on, to bury the memories of a love that was never meant to be, but they clung to him like an old wound that refused to heal. The Seraph weren't just another alien species. They were a mystery wrapped in beauty and danger. Their society operated under strict hierarchies, and their disdain for humanity stemmed from a belief in their own superiority. Relationships between their kind and humans were forbidden, a law punishable by exile or worse. Rapunzel's lineage made the stakes even higher. She was of the celestial line, the closest thing the Seraph had to royalty. Elliot hadn't known that at first, but once he did, it only deepened the impossibility of their bond. He still remembered the last time he saw her. It had been in the dim light of the observation deck, the station's glass dome offering a panoramic view of Earth below. She stood there, her glowing form a stark contrast against the darkness of space. "I can't stay," she had said, her voice trembling. "If they find out, they'll..." He had reached for her, desperate to close the distance between them. "We'll find a way. I don't care what they—" "You don't understand," she interrupted, tears glistening in her radiant eyes. "They'll destroy everything. You meet this station. They'll erase us as if we never existed." Her words had been a knife to his heart, but her departure was a twist that drove it deeper. Without another word, she had vanished, leaving only the faintest trace of her light behind. Years had passed, but the ache remained. Elliot had told himself that marrying Marina was a step forward, a way to build something solid and real. Yet every now and then, when the night was quiet and the stars seemed closer than ever, he felt the ghost of Rapunzel's presence, as if she were still watching him from some distant corner of the galaxy. Marina deserved better. She deserved a husband who could give her his whole heart, not just the fractured pieces he had left. But Elliot didn't know how to let go of a love that had transcended reason, a love that had made him feel alive in a way nothing else ever had. The hum of the station grew louder in the stillness, a reminder of the world he had chosen to live in. But somewhere beyond the veil of stars, another world called to him, a world he had once touched but could never truly hold. Elliot turned off the holographic screen and stared out the window, his reflection blending with the constellations beyond. The past was a dangerous place to dwell, but tonight it felt closer than ever, as if it were just waiting for the right moment to break through. The artificial night aboard the station was as silent as a held breath when the glow first appeared. At the edge of Elliot's vision, a faint, pulsing light shimmered just outside the observation window, too rhythmic to be a star. He blinked, leaning closer, his heart quickening. The station's sensors should have flagged anything approaching, yet the light moved closer, weaving through the void as if it sought him out specifically. For a moment, he told himself it was nothing, an optical illusion or perhaps a malfunction in the observation equipment. But deep down he knew better. The glow was unmistakable. Elliot rose, his breath shallow, and made his way to the docking bay, his mind racing. Could it really be her after all these years? And if it was, why now? The answers didn't matter. Not yet. What mattered was the way his chest tightened with anticipation, dread, and a flicker of something else. Hope. The bay was dark, its hum of machinery the only sound. As the airlock cycled open, the glow intensified, spilling into the metallic chamber like liquid moonlight. And then she stepped through. Rapunzel. She was exactly as he remembered, yet different. Her silken, luminous hair still flowed like a living river of light, but her face bore a weariness he had never seen before. She looked older, though not in the way humans did. Her features were sharper, her glow dimmer, as though the years had carved their mark into her essence. "Elliot," she said, her voice soft but carrying the weight of 1,000 unspoken words. His throat tightened. How are you here? Why now?" She hesitated, her glowing eyes scanning his face. "I had to see you. I couldn't stay away any longer." The room felt too small for the enormity of her presence, for the gravity of what her arrival meant. Elliot leaned against a console, trying to steady himself. "You left," he said, his voice trembling. "You disappeared without a word. Do you have any idea what that did to me?" "I didn't have a choice," she replied, stepping closer. "If I had stayed, they would have destroyed us both. I thought leaving was the only way to protect you. And now," he asked, bitterness creeping into his tone, "what's changed? Why risk coming back after all this time?" Her gaze softened, and for the first time he noticed the faintest quiver in her luminous form. "Because I couldn't forget you, Elliot. No matter how much I tried, no matter what they did, you've been with me every moment since I left." Her words hit him like a wave, threatening to drown the carefully constructed walls he had built around his heart. He wanted to reach for her, to pull her into his arms and demand answers to all the questions that had haunted him for years. But another voice, quieter but insistent, stopped him. Marina. He glanced toward the corridor leading back to their quarters, guilt settling like a stone in his chest. I'm married now, he said, his voice barely above a whisper. I've tried to move on. I have a life here. I know, Rapunzel said, her expression unreadable. I don't want to destroy that. I only came to see you, to tell you the truth I couldn't before. What truth? She hesitated, her hands clasping together as if to steady herself. I'm bonded to another. It was their punishment for what I felt for you. They hoped it would erase you from my heart, but it didn't. It couldn't. The words hung between them, heavy with implication. Elliot clenched his fists, anger and sorrow warring within him. So, what are you saying? That you're here to what? Rekindle something that can't exist? I don't know, she admitted, her voice breaking. I only know that I couldn't live with myself if I didn't see you one last time. The sound of footsteps echoed down the corridor, breaking the fragile moment. Elliot's stomach dropped. Elliot? Marina's voice called, closer now. What's going on? Why are the sensors picking up a fluctuation in the docking bay? Panic flared in his chest. You have to hide, he hissed at Rapunzel, his voice urgent. Rapunzel stepped back, her glow dimming as she moved into the shadows. Marina entered a moment later, her sharp eyes scanning the room. She looked at Elliot, then at the faint traces of light still lingering in the air. What's going on? She asked, her tone edged with suspicion. Just a malfunction, Elliot said quickly, his voice too tight. I was checking it out. Marina narrowed her eyes. A malfunction that left traces of this? She gestured to the faint glow. Elliot hesitated, the weight of his deception pressing down on him. It's nothing, just some residual energy from the external shielding system. Marina didn't look convinced, but she nodded slowly. All right, but let me know if anything else happens. I don't like anomalies this close to the Council's visit. I will, he promised, relief flooding him as she turned and left the bay. Rapunzel stepped out of the shadows, her expression unreadable. You didn't tell her. I can't, Elliot said, his voice strained. She wouldn't understand. She deserves better than this. And what do you deserve? Rapunzel asked, her glowing eyes piercing into his. Elliot had no answer. The minutes stretched into hours as Elliot and Rapunzel spoke in hushed tones, their words heavy with longing and regret. She told him of the years she had spent trying to conform, to suppress the part of her that still yearned for him. He told her of the emptiness that had lingered, even as he built a life with Marina. But as the conversation deepened, so did the cracks in Elliot's resolve. Every word, every glance, pulled him closer to the edge of a precipice he wasn't sure he could step back from. As the first rays of artificial dawn filtered through the station's corridors, Rapunzel stood, her form glowing softly. I can't stay much longer, she said, her voice heavy with sadness. They'll know I'm gone soon. Elliot's chest tightened. Then why did you come? To remind you, she said simply, that love like ours doesn't fade. No matter what they tell us, no matter how much time passes, it's still real. Her words struck him like a blow, leaving him speechless as she turned to leave. Rapunzel, he called, his voice cracking. She paused, looking back at him. This doesn't change anything. I know, she said, her expression bittersweet. But it changes everything for me. And with that, she was gone, leaving Elliot alone in the cold, empty bay. Elliot's mind churned as he paced the observation deck, his eyes fixed on the stars. Rapunzel's visit had left a wound he couldn't ignore, reopening feelings he thought were buried. He couldn't shake the memory of her eyes, glowing with a mix of pain and longing, nor her words. Love like ours doesn't fade. But here, on this station, was another truth, Marina, his wife, who had stood by him in ways no one else ever had. The weight of his divided heart pressed down on him, forcing him to confront a question he could no longer avoid. What did love mean if it could break two lives apart? Hours later, he found Marina in the station's arboretum. She stood amid the artificial trees, her fingers trailing across the delicate leaves. The green glow of the UV lights gave her features a soft hue, but her expression was distant, thoughtful. "Marina," Elliot began, his voice tentative. She turned, her sharp eyes locking onto his. "You've been quiet all morning. Care to explain what's going on?" For a moment, Elliot couldn't speak. The words felt lodged in his throat. He had practiced this conversation in his mind, but under her steady gaze, everything crumbled. "I need to tell you something," he said finally. "And it's not easy." Her brows knit together, but she said nothing, waiting. He faltered, then forced himself to continue. "There's someone I cared about before you and I were together. She came back last night." Marina's lips parted slightly, but she didn't interrupt. "She's not human," Elliot admitted, his voice trembling. "She's a seraph. Years ago, I was part of the exchange program, and we fell in love. It wasn't supposed to happen, but it did. And then she left. I thought I'd never see her again, but now—" "Stop," Marina said sharply. Her voice wasn't loud, but it cut through his words like a blade. Elliot froze, guilt radiating from every pore. "You're telling me," she said slowly, "that while we've been building a life together, you've been holding on to some alien lover from years ago?" "It's not like that," he said quickly. "I thought I'd moved on. I thought she was gone forever. But now that she's here, now that she's here, what?" Marina demanded, stepping closer. Her tone wasn't angry. It was cold, clinical, the way she approached problems she wanted to dissect. "You're suddenly questioning everything? Questioning us?" Elliot looked down, unable to meet her gaze. "I don't know. I needed to tell you." Marina let out a sharp breath, shaking her head. "I don't know if I should be furious or grateful for your honesty." She paused, then added, "What does she want?" "She wanted to see me. To say goodbye, I think. But it stirred up everything I thought I'd buried." Marina crossed her arms, her voice softening slightly. "And what about us, Elliot? Does this change anything for you?" Elliot hesitated. "I don't want it to. I want to be here with you. But you don't know if you can let her go." Marina finished, her voice flat. The tension between them hung in the air, heavy and unresolved. Elliot felt the urge to defend himself, to explain the unexplainable, but before he could speak, the station's emergency lights flared red. A warning klaxon blared, and the station's AI chimed in. Unauthorized craft detected within restricted space. All personnel to alert status. Elliot's stomach dropped. He didn't need to see the reports to know who it was. He rushed to the command center, Marina close behind. The holographic display lit up, showing a sleek, glowing vessel hovering dangerously close to the station. Its design was unmistakable, a seraph craft. "Elliot," Marina said, her voice low but urgent. "What's going on?" Before he could answer, the comm system activated and a familiar voice filled the room. "Elliot," Rapunzel said, her tone calm but tinged with urgency. "I need you to come to me. Please." Marina's eyes widened and she turned to Elliot, her expression a mixture of disbelief and anger. "Tell me this isn't happening." Elliot's heart pounded as he activated the comm. "Rapunzel, what are you doing? You can't be here." "I had no choice," she replied. "They know I've been here. If they find me, they'll destroy me, and anyone connected to me. I can't leave without you, Elliot. If you stay, they'll come for you too." Marina stepped forward, cutting in. "Whoever you are, You've put this entire station at risk. Leave. Now. There was silence on the other end. Then Rapunzel's voice, quieter now. I won't leave without him. Elliot turned to Marina, his chest tight. I have to talk to her. You're not seriously considering this, Marina said, her voice rising. Elliot, this is insane. She's not your responsibility anymore. I just need to end this, he said, his voice pleading. Marina stared at him for a long moment, then stepped back. Fine, but if you walk out that door, don't expect me to be waiting when you come back. The words cut deeper than Elliot expected, but he nodded and left without looking back. Rapunzel was waiting in the docking bay, her glowing form dimmer than before. The moment Elliot saw her, his heart ached with both longing and dread. You shouldn't have come back, he said, his voice heavy. I had to, she replied. I couldn't leave things the way they were. They stood in silence for a moment, the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on them. Rapunzel, Elliot began, his voice breaking. I can't go with you. I have a life here, a life I chose. I can't abandon it. Even for you. She looked at him, her luminous eyes shimmering with tears. I understand, she said softly, but I had to try. Elliot stepped closer, reaching out to touch her hand. I'll never forget you, but this is goodbye. She nodded, her light growing fainter as she stepped back toward her ship. Goodbye, Elliot. I hope you find peace. As her craft disappeared into the stars, Elliot felt a hollow ache in his chest. He turned and walked back to the Arboretum, unsure if Marina would still be there. She was. Marina looked at him, her eyes hard but not unkind. Is it over? Yes, Elliot said simply. She studied him for a long moment, then nodded. Let's make sure it stays that way. Elliot sat beside her, the weight of his choices settling in. He had chosen his life on Earth, but the scars of what he left behind would remain. As the stars continued to shine outside the station, Elliot knew one truth. Love could shape a life, but it could also fracture it, leaving pieces that might never fully heal.